Good morning, everyone. My name is David Silk. I'm the Director of Operations here at the Housing Agency. I'm delighted to be chairing this final session of our annual conference. Over the last 4 morning sessions, we have focused on the big issues: the future of social housing, homelessness, affordability, and sustainability. The focus this morning is on building your career in housing. And why? Because we need people to make a difference. Here in the agency, we believe that you can have a great career in housing. There are lots to do, lots to learn. You get to work with great people, and most important, you get to have a real impact on people's lives. A quick run over the programme for this morning. We're going to start with 2 short inputs on education supports and then move on to a skills session on starting a new role in housing during a pandemic. After the skills session, there will be a panel to discuss career insights. There are opportunities throughout to post questions or comments about your own experiences over the last 10 months. We're scheduled to finish at 12 noon, so a lot to get through. Before we start, just to point out that there's a resource pack available for download in the sidebar at handouts. That includes information on training and education opportunities for you. The Housing Agency is sponsoring the creation of a housing practitioner peer network. Once a month, the agency will host a coffee morning via Zoom for housing practitioners in different organisations, giving them a chance to meet and network in an online space. For further information and a sign-up sheet, they're also available at the handouts. If you have any technical issues, please leave the webinar and rejoin. If the issue persists, please send us a question and type tech at the beginning of your question. So, first we're going to showcase some details about education opportunities. There are about 5,000 people working in the housing and planning sections of local authorities and a further 2,000 working in approved housing bodies and support services. So the agency established a housing training network to help support and coordinate training to housing practitioners. Members include the Institute of Public Administration, the Irish Council for Social Housing, the Chartered Institute of Housing, the Residential Tenancies Board, the Local Government Management Agency, the Dublin Region Homes Executive, and the Irish Green Building Council. So now we're going to hear from 2 of these providers. Cian Rowan is Assistant Specialist with the Local Government Unit of the Institute of Public Administration and joined the Institute from Cork City Council in January of this year. Cian participates in the delivery of local government training programmes with a particular focus on housing. Catherine McGillicuddy is Development Specialist for Education and Membership with the Irish Council for Social Housing. Her main areas of responsibility include overseeing membership affiliation, coordinating education and training courses, and maintaining the website. Catherine has a degree in social science and a master's degree in sociology, both from University College Cork. Her previous work experience in the area of social housing includes working in a voluntary housing association in Kerry and in Dublin City Council's housing department. So Cian is going to go first and then he's going to pass over to Catherine. Cian, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much to yourself and the Housing Agency for having me on. And I'd like to commend you on a great conference all week. I just want to speak very briefly about a couple of streams that we have in the IPA. So just as you can see there, just a quick background on the IPA is Ireland's only public service development agency focused exclusively on public sector development. I just want to talk through a couple of streams there in terms of education and training and the IPA Housing Forum, which we launched back in August. So firstly, look at education. There are 2 kind of specific housing accredited programs that the IPA offers. Now there are other accredited programs in areas such as public finance, healthcare, health and safety, human resource management that would also be relevant for housing practitioners. But in terms of specific housing accredited programs, we have a certificate, which is a level 6 on the NFQ, and a professional diploma in housing studies, which is a level 8, which is was the first of its kind when it was introduced. So the certificate and the diploma, they both run on an academic calendar. They run from September to April. So if you are interested in the programs, you will be looking at next year. The certificate is much more entry level, as you can imagine, into housing studies, very much a kind of broad macro view of the kind of systems that are in place. It's 7 modules, there are a couple of essays, and there's a final exam. The professional diploma is much more kind of policy oriented. It is a much more kind of in-depth program looking at all aspects of housing. As I say, it's level 8 on the NFQ, so it is a serious qualification. And again, it runs on the academic calendar, and it does much more in terms of assessment then as well. There's one major essay alongside regular essays and the exams at the end of the year, so 5,000 word essays, so it is a big program. There are also entry requirements into the professional diploma. In many respects, you're required to do the certificate first. There is dispensation there if you have significant housing experience, that you can go straight into the diploma, and that's assessed on a case-by-case basis. I'll just make 2 points there at the end as well, that these are programs that are designed for adult students who want to obtain third level qualification and continue in their roles. They're not designed to put you under pressure, so these are designed for working professionals in the housing sector. And as David mentioned there, I have a background in the local authority. I know is a prerequisite for myself, especially for accredited programs, that if you wanted to undertake them, that had to be part of your PMDS. So next time you are speaking with your line manager, as I say, particularly for the accredited programs, it's worth maybe putting down that this is something you'd be interested in. And just moving on into training, as I say, I work in the local government training unit in the IPA. We have a number of housing related programs that are quite popular. I list most of them there on the right. Rent arrears and mortgage arrears, as you can imagine, these are things that are cropping up particularly this year and will become more prominent next year, alongside as well general debt collection, debt management techniques. Is something we're seeing increasingly, that local authorities, approved housing bodies, etc., are looking for these, how to deal with people who are in arrears or people who are struggling in that respect. We also have a proper introduction to social housing course that really, again, for people who are new to the sector, they kind of want to get a grasp of, especially the terminology and all the different programs that are out there. Dealing with antisocial behaviour is something that is always training that is quite popular. It's always something that creeps up. And then we have a general legislative training program, looks all at the areas of local government, but that has a serious housing component. So if you do want to get a background on the legislative aspect, I just mentioned earlier that these are practitioner-led practical training. That is true in all respects. Most of the courses through external associates. So the combating rent arrears is run with a director of service and an administrative officer from the finance section who deals with rent arrears. Same with mortgage arrears. Dealing with antisocial behaviour is run by a senior housing inspector from Dunleary Rathdown. Debt collection techniques is the head of the Irish Credit Management Agency. We have a solicitor who looks at court preparation, insolvency practitioners who look at that aspect as well. Finally, I just want to finish up on the IPA Housing Forum was launched in August in conjunction with the Housing Agency. We're very grateful to them for their support. At present, the Housing Agency was just running, the Housing Forum was just running to the end of this year, but we're launching our programme for next year in the coming weeks. So we have run monthly webinars on a variety of housing related topics. I list a couple of them there. New programme for government, affordable housing, social housing support and delivery. And we have homeless services next Thursday. This is an organisation based membership. And you can see I put a link to the website there. So it's for organisations to sign up, to nominate members then, and any member then of the organisation can sign up to these webinars. As I say, we'll be launching our programme next week. If you're interested, or if your organisation is interested, then you can email housingforum@ipa.ie, or if you're interested in any other programmes, it'll be training@ipa.ie, or even my own email address is crohan@ipa.ie. I'd again just like to thank the Housing Agency for having me on and wish them the best of luck with the rest of the day. And I just hand you over to Catherine McGillicuddy. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks very much, Cian, and thanks to the Housing Agency for the opportunity to be here this morning. As David said in the introduction, I work for the Irish Council for Social Housing, and we're the National Federation for Voluntary Housing Associations in Ireland. We represent around 270 approved housing bodies who collectively own and manage around 40,000 social housing units across the country. So one of our roles was to represent our members in various ways, and one of the ways we do that is the provision of relevant education and training courses. And I suppose there's been a huge focus in the last few years on viewing housing as a career and developing housing as a career, and it's great, I think, that the Housing Agency have dedicated a full session of their conference to developing that idea, and we're delighted to be part of it, so thanks again. In the ISH, we'd absolutely agree that housing should be viewed as a career. In Ireland, there's no clear single educational pathway into housing as a career, and as a result of that, I think people end up in housing from all sorts of professional and academic backgrounds. Might be from social care backgrounds, or planning, or architecture, or finance backgrounds even. So that gives a really great diversity of skills and experiences and attributes. for people working in housing. But it's so important, I think, that we start to view it as a career where people can stay in long term and kind of grow and develop those skills and stay with housing throughout their career. So in the ICSH, our education and training initiatives are very much focused on supporting housing practitioners throughout their career. And we do that in a number of ways. The resource pack that David mentioned is available in the handout section there, and that includes some information on ICSH initiatives around education and training. So the main education course that we deliver is the Irish delivery of the CIH certificate in housing course. So this course is aimed at people who are working in housing for a while and perhaps are looking for a course that develops their existing knowledge, or who maybe have educational qualifications in other areas and are looking for a dedicated housing qualification. So if you're relatively new to working in housing, it might be something that you look at doing maybe in a year or two's time. We would generally describe it as being suitable for people who are maybe at manager level or working towards manager level in housing. So the course usually starts in January. The January 2021 course is currently booked out, but it's something maybe to think about for the future. And there's a full kind of brochure on the course in the handout section there. And the course has 6 modules in total. We look at things like housing policy, housing law, housing finance, housing need and demand, housing management, and professional practice skills for housing. So there's a very broad overview of some, real key areas within housing, as well as a module dedicated to kind of self-reflection and reflecting on your career and reflecting on the skills needed to be a housing practitioner. So it's a very thorough course. Like Cian outlined with the IPA courses, it's very much designed for people who are already kind of working in housing, and it will, I suppose, kind of, it's delivered through blended learning. So it's one class day with dedicated online resources and ongoing tutor support throughout. So you'll be kind of supported throughout the full year that the course actually takes place. So that's the main accredited training course that we run. In addition to that, we also have a fairly wide range of seminars and webinars that we deliver throughout the year. So even if it's not part of a dedicated training course, we do kind of look at sort of ongoing issues that people feel they might be training in, or emerging issues that are new for the sector, and we address those through sort of information seminars and webinars as well. So in 2020 we've had around 25 information seminars on issues of sort of regulation, technical issues around finance, and then some very practical issues, kind of for frontline housing workers and supporting them. So we look at kind of a very broad range of things. Quite a few of our sessions in 2020, probably obviously enough, related to COVID-19 and supporting housing practitioners through that. So we're very proud that we were able to support our members and support the housing sector through such a crisis as that. In early 2021, we'll be launching our 2021 events calendar. And our seminars are likely to focus on topics such as the new regulatory environment for approved housing bodies, registration dispute resolution issues with the Residential Tenancies Board, housing finance issues, things like CAS funding applications, asset management and stock condition surveys, and any other issues that emerge, because as 2020 has taught us, things can crop up that we haven't been expecting. We always want to be able to support and provide information and training to our members on those issues. So that's a very quick introduction to what we do in the ICSH in terms of education and training. If there's any issue that you as a housing practitioner, that you have that you're interested in, or that you feel is an area that you would like some training or some support in that isn't out there already, please do get in touch with us. We'd be delighted to kind of chat about that with you and either point you in the direction of existing training about that issue, or maybe look at developing something in that area for you. So thank you very much again to the Housing Agency for being part for the invitation to speak today, and do get in touch if there's anything you'd like to discuss with us in relation to training going forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cian and Catherine, for those inputs. And I know from our own experience here in the Housing Agency, members of staff have gone on courses in both the Irish Council for Social Housing and the IPA, and we've got very positive feedback from those. And we also run a bursary program as well to support people. So if you are thinking of undertaking a formal training in housing, do look out for the bursary programme. And remember that the course details that Cian and Catherine were talking about are available on the sidebar. Just also to let you know that we'll be running a series of career development activities next spring, so keep an eye out on our communication channels for more information. So now for the next half an hour, we're going to hear from Tom Bamber, a trainer with the Chartered Institute of Housing. The title of his session is Starting a New Role in Housing During a Pandemic. If you have started a new role in housing or new members have joined your organisation or team, this session should be of particular interest. Tom has worked as a leadership and communications consultant and coach over the last 20 years and has gained insights from both the public and the private sectors in every type of organisation, focusing on organisational development, people engagement, alignment, communications, leadership, coaching and performance enhancement. Remember to use the questions function if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make. Tom, it's over to you now.
Thanks very much, David. So hello everybody and welcome to this section of the session. So this is entitled Build Your Career in Housing. And what we're going to be focusing on in this part is to look at elements that really lead to maximising your potential. I work and coach, as he said there, with lots of different levels within lots of different sectors. But I work with people from the front line all the way through to chief exec positions. And what's fascinating is you often get similar sorts of questions from every level. So it doesn't matter the level you're at. Often the way we sort of see the way we communicate and the way we engage as our potential as being one of the key things to focus on. So we're going to look at some of the psychology behind that and some of the things you can do to work your best self to the front of the queue, if you like, in relation to managing within a pandemic, within some of the challenges that can be there, and some self-coaching. Now, coaching is a great thing, a great tool that you can use to help and support others. Very important that we work together and collaborate, but also that you can help to work with yourself. So if you don't have the opportunity to go and see a coach, you can actually get inside your own mind and start to think, well, what can I do for me that will help me develop myself? And within that, resilience is a big focus in relation to mental health and all the challenges we're facing around the world, really, with this global pandemic. So resilience and how we manage that around balance is very important. So we've got some slides that we can cover in relation to that. In the slide pack that you can download, there's some extra slides in there that we won't have the time to cover today. But they're pretty self-explanatory, and also you can get in touch with me and ask questions at a later date if you so wish. So this first one that's on the screen here, entitled Self-Awareness Model. All coaching starts with awareness, understanding a little bit about how we tick and how we communicate. And one of the very important things about this is be open, be you. So the first thing here, linked to your personal police officer, which is this chap over here. And this doesn't have to be a police officer, it could be an editor, and it's just somebody in your mind that helps you and supports you by giving you that little bit of a voice that says, are you sure that's the right thing to do? Maybe we could tweak that, given the audience, are they on board? The ideas that you've had, are those ideas in line with what's being talked about, or are those just ideas that you're thinking about at this moment in time? So it's that little bit of a sense check before we put it out there in the world, and it can be done really quickly, but often you'll find that we do it late, and so you'll often find you do something and then you go, oh, if only I'd talked to my inner voice. So by practicing that all the time, we get better at it. It doesn't mean you have to do it all the time, but it does help every now and again when it's an important factor. Outcome, think about what it is that you're trying to achieve before you go out there. Make sure that the things you're about to do are aligned to the things you want to achieve at the end of that. And in relation to your feelings, how are you feeling in that moment in time? If there's nerves in there, is that a bad thing or a good thing in your perception? I personally feel nervous, and I've done it for 20 years. So I feel nervous before I go out and speak. I feel nervous before I speak on camera. But I've seen that nerves are actually quite a useful thing. So I can harness those and go, well, actually, that's just positive energy because I want to do a good job. So by reframing that in my mind, it enables me to sort of enable my path and my pace to come in line with that positivity, as opposed to thinking nerves equals bad, equals worry, equals anxiety. Rather than that, it's nerves, good, passion, excellent, engage. So how we do that very often in meetings is really important. We can think about the meeting that we're in, and we start to accelerate to the end point of what we're about to say because we want to say it. And then we lose track of where we're up to in the meeting. So breathe, take time, and see what it is in relation to the context, so that your response ties in very nicely with the context that's going on. Your thoughts then start to really work for you. And there might be some people in the audience today who say, well, I'm more of a feeler than I am a thinker, or I'm more of a thinker than I am a feeler. Either way, you can use those and harness those to really add value to what it is you're about to say in that meeting. Align your thinking just by thinking about the process that you're going to use to put forward what you want to share, so that your communication is clear and that people really pick up on that and engage with it. And that's why I was so excited to be involved in this about building your career, because at whichever stage of your life you're in, building your career is something that we often need to focus on. I work with various people in different sectors where they've retired in post initially, where they've decided, you know what, I'm not really into this. And they start to lose energy for it, but they don't want to give up their job. So they stay there, but they're not giving that energy. So those individuals need to build their career to start thinking, well, if I'm going to stay here, what can I do to add value, which will make me feel like I'm adding value, that will give me that energy and that positivity back again and lead to my motivation through my communication, so that my behaviors align to that. And so this self-awareness model absolutely ties all of those factors together and brings in the self-awareness model that we've just described there. The next slide that we'll come to is this one here. I always use a tree to do this because psychology is one of those titles that people think, oh, I'm not a psychologist, I would want to cover psychology. All of us think, all of us have a mind, and all of us have emotion. And you can be the toughest old stick that's there. Doesn't mean you don't have emotion and that you don't need to be mindful of the way you feel in any given subject. So this tree aligns us to sort of think about, well, okay, how does that work for me then? How can I turn that into a positive thing to recognize and utilize? So at the top of our tree, we've got our trait theory. And the trait theory refers to our flexible self. If you go to an interview, that's often the you that you bring front and center into that moment. If you're going to go to a party, it's the bit that you decide to step into. So that's the trait, that's at the top of the tree, and that's the one that's affected most by the environments around us. Down at the bottom of the tree is type theory. This is an innate characteristic. So if you've ever heard of a thing called the MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, that's a very good example of a type-based theory. Because what that's saying is you're born and your style is with you, okay? And that's going to be with you for the rest of your life, okay? So understand how to harness that potential. So when I talked about earlier on being a thinker or a feeler, you have that from a very early perspective. You can utilize your traits at the top of the tree there that can sort of say, well, actually, I'd like to be more thinking for this interaction. But you've got to be mindful, if you're a feeler at your core, that your feelings need to be something that you're mindful of throughout that sort of session. On the side there, there's focus theory, and on the other side, there's path theory. So in relation to focus theory, this sort of stack of bags we've got at the side here, that's about our cases that we carry through life. You don't have baggage. It's often seen as a negative term. It's more about our luggage that we carry with us. And it's just all of our experience that we've had. And every experience, good or bad, will have lent itself to our future thought processing and how we deal with the world. And if we can harness the learning from all of those, they can be seen as a positive for us going forward. And we can really leverage our potential from those learning experiences. So often I'll deal with either returners to work, or I'll deal with people who've just come into an area where they haven't had experience before. And I'll say, well, actually, the experience you've had before this in the other role you might have had, or the life experience you had before that, lends itself really well to your capability and your capacity for delivering excellent services and jobs to your customers and the citizens that you serve. And then on the other side, the path theory, that's about the paths that we choose and the paths that sometimes choose us. I work with charities with people who've fallen on tough times, and maybe had very complex and serious needs they've had to work with. And often when I work with them, it's about how do they reprogram the way that they see the paths that they've chosen and the way that they acknowledge the things that they were pushed into, and how they then decide what they're going to choose to do next. So no matter the path, your choice is what you do whilst you're in it. So although it might have been pushed upon you, it's what you do next in relation to the choices you're able to make that makes the difference, And working in an organization like in the housing sector, fabulous opportunity to really choose paths that you want to go down. It is the best sector, I find, for people moving around in their organizations, working here, then working over here. I worked recently with a chief exec who started in the contact center. That was the first job that they had there. And then they ended up becoming the chief exec in that organization. So they really do demonstrate a great opportunity to climb throughout the organization. Now, whenever we think of climbing, we think of the height that is associated with it. And it's fascinating to find I'll get, you know, long-term individuals, worked a long time in different sectors, and they're finding, oh, this is quite challenging, I'm quite nervous about this. And it's just, okay, take this opportunity to breathe. You might work with a guy who just started, and that individual's just been in the door for 2 weeks, but when it comes to presenting, they're really confident and they can absolutely smash it out of the park every time. That chief exec might want to learn from that individual who's just started in their career. So there's real opportunity to think, take stock, and focus in the areas that are useful to you. So no matter the journey or stage on the journey, take time to focus and pick up on the things. Somebody said to me before my wedding day, actually, you'll notice through the day that it's going really quick. Breathe, take time to notice who's there, what you're doing, what you're enjoying about the day, because you'll really get a lot from that memory. If only somebody had given me that advice 20 years ago, I would have remembered much more about my journey and really taken stock of every decision I made and how that was going to influence my journey going forward. I mean, it's worked out pretty well for me, but taking stock is a real opportunity to see those learning opportunities that we were hearing about earlier on today and going, oh yeah, I'd like to do more in that area. I'd like to look more in that sector there and link that to that, and maybe do partnership working and how we can join all these different forces together for the benefit of the citizens that we serve. Our reality, and the reality up on the side of that is very much about, well, what is the reality? With anxiety in relation to the pandemic, this is something I really focus on a lot with people, is that you don't have to panic about everything that you might imagine going wrong. Now you're in the moment and actually you're okay. So focus on that and think about the steps you want to take to get to where you want to get to next. And that will really facilitate and help you using the right kind of energy to move forward. And so the individual you can see in the middle of that is Bruce Lee. And you can imagine how Bruce Lee would talk about being centered in relation to the energy that he shares. And the little quote that's in there is, the usefulness of the cup is its emptiness. And if you can still see me on screen, I like to use a little bottle to demonstrate that in respect of your energy and your anxiety levels and your resilience, all linking together in this life bottle. And so all this water here, that's just the experiences that you're going through, the different challenges that you might face. And as you start to get pressure applied to this bottle, you can see the water line starting to get nearer and nearer to the top of that. You need to take stock anytime in your career and think, actually, I could do with asking for help here. It's not a bad thing to ask for help. I need to just take some pressure off and think about what I want to do next going forward into it. Okay, so use that analogy and think, you know, am I getting a little bit close to the top? What's my resilience like? If I need some time or I need some help, I need to ask for it. Because often we find ourselves in a position when we're new in a career where we don't feel confident enough to maybe ask for help because we think it looks like weakness. Not asking for help is often what we see in this new world that we're in today as being a sign of weakness. So feel comfortable and confident in asking for help. Very important sort of message from that. Your personality will obviously play a part in how you do that, and coping strategies will vary depending on what you're doing. And we've got some good ones for that in a moment that we'll touch on. Exercise brings on optimism. So doing things that just get the endorphins running and flowing, listening to great music, whatever it is that floats your boat, you can do things that just bring that bit of va-va-voom to you. And when I say va-va-voom, I mean it in the respect of when you join an organization, you often bring quite a lot of energy with you. And people are like, oh, great, breath of fresh air, this is fantastic. You want to keep that through the whole entirety of your career by making sure you focus on that optimism and bringing it forward, because it helps with our well-being and it enables the network to want us in it. And the network's really key in respect of how you join and you make friends and colleagues that you can utilize as you go. And then the coach, the alpha voice. So this slide's really great because it sets up all the other slides that you can refer to in your own time. And it's very much about how do we get alpha? And what do I mean by alpha? Well, alpha is very much about being cool, calm, and collected. The great leaders that we can see when we look on the media, we can see great examples and we can see not so great examples. If we look at, say, Trump, we'll often see that people would say, oh, that individual can sometimes be a bit direct, etc. That would often be seen as a dominant style of communication, but an uncalm dominance. So it's about trying to take control of things because of the fear of what's behind not having control. Whereas to be an alpha, what that is to be cool, calm, and collected in the moment. So Obama's quite a good example of that, where he's not really that bothered about winning. It's more about how he is in that moment. Yeah. So when somebody threw him that basketball, if you saw that video where he caught it and hit a 3-pointer and hit nothing but net, and it's like, this is what we do. And it's like, whoa, how does somebody do that when the media's attention is on you? Because he wasn't really bothered if it bounced off the side or not in that moment. Now, obviously, when you reflect, you go, oh, great that it went in. But he wasn't worried about the outcome at the end. At that moment in time, he was thinking, be in the moment and enjoy it. And whatever happens, you'll be fine with. That's the alpha voice. It's being cool, calm, and collected in the moment. Bring in positive inputs and be mindful of the environment that you're working with in relation to that. That flows into this next slide, which is about, well, think about who you are, your values. What are the core values that you live by? And I'd encourage you to just take a moment to think about that and just write down, just jot down or hold in your mind, what is the value that you tend to live by? What are your core values? You might have 5 that you know of, but this is really important in relation to how you fit into a team and how you work and operate in the system. And very importantly, when we work in a system, sometimes that system can frustrate us and it can make us angry. And we're not sure why it's making us angry. And when I coach these individuals, I'll ask them what their core values are. And we might find that what happened in the workplace was actually a violation of a personal value. But they didn't say anything about it, they just swallowed it. And that can sometimes build up pressure. If they know that's a core value that's being violated, they can say, can I just stop you there? I need to draw your attention to the fact this is really important to me. And the way you're describing it or talking about it, I find is actually relatively offensive. I just don't want you to go too far without knowing that that's important to me. You'll often find that a person will go, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that by it. If you do it at that moment in time. If we don't challenge it, all of a sudden it becomes something far greater because we boil on it. Here's some great examples: professionalism, making a difference, fairness, understanding, compassion. So if those are things that you hold true to you, just think about how you can make sure that they stay true to you as you climb through the organization. Very important that if it was important to you at the beginning of your career, that it's still important to you when you become the chief exec, because they're things that your team will really value in you. You're a person just like them. And that links to our learning styles. So when we talk about learning styles, there's a number of different levels. There's the first level, which is single loop. And that links to what it is that we need to do. Pretty simple that. You get a new job, someone tells you what to do, you do it. That's not good enough anymore. Just to do a job that somebody tells you to do is never enough. We need to add our personal value to it, and we need to add a little bit of extra to it. And that little bit of hot sauce that we add to it comes from our why. What is it that makes us special, and how do we add value? So sometimes people will think that I'm a bit of a renegade, because I can just be a little bit, oh, let's do this and let's do that. And you might think, oh, be less renegade, Tom, because actually that's something that might make people a bit nervous. I don't want to leave that, because actually that's really important to who I am at my core. So if I forget a bit of renegade, then I'm maybe not as much as me. And it's important to hold that true. But if I know that being a renegade makes people uncertain about whether or not I'll be there in time or have done the preparation, that just means I have to do more preparation to let the person know that I'm prepared. Because the individual I work with might be like, has he done it all? As long as I let them know I've done it, I can still be renegade. I can still be me bouncing around like Tigger, but I can make sure that I'm delivering what they need to make themselves feel secure as well. And this is great for climbing the ladder through our careers, because it enables us not only to work to our strength, but recognize how our strengths can impart excellence to the team we're working with, and recognize the balance that we need to achieve within the group. And that would be the how that's there. So if you go from 1 to 2 to 3 and you climb up through the levels to the why, it's bringing your personality to the A game. Never feel that you shouldn't bring your personality to it, okay? Your personality is fabulous because it makes you you. Link that to all the learning that you're going to do throughout your journey, and it becomes absolutely fantastic employees and people that really are very important to the organization. And so just to link to that, we talk about the environment, behavior, and capability that we mentioned before. You can see that that's down at the bottom. And then as we go up through the different levels, the sense of purpose that we have is that top level 1, discretionary effort. So from the previous slide, the why, that links to your discretionary effort. And so many organizations today are reliant on discretionary effort. If a person just comes and does enough, it's never enough to add that perfection that the organizations are striving now in relation to the services that we offer our people. So make sure we do the right thing by bringing our personality and having a strong sense of purpose. And that might mean that sometimes you need to challenge the system. because if it's not working right for your sense of purpose, let people know. Don't just stand by. Have your voices heard, because your voices are hugely important to the way that we progress going forward. And it is a sector that has a lot of change. So utilize your excellence within the change environment to bring something to the table with your teams and your organizations. So what this slide talks about is, if we want to engage somebody, how do we do it? Often people will say, I know that one. It's visual. That's the first, that's the most important. But actually that's third. They'll then say, oh, it's all right, it's auditory then. No, that's the fourth. So the first one, the most important one, is actually kinesthetic. And I know there's a number 2 on that. That's because it happens in the sequencing in relation to process. You have to think before you engage, but that's before you actually connect. How you engage might be as simple as to say, hi, everybody, and just give them a wave. How's it going? Oh, by the way, how did that thing you mentioned last week go? Rather than just jumping in the deep end with the information that you want to get, because at that point, you're not paced with the individual and they don't really feel that you care about them. And as you know, caring's caring. If you can show care, people will share, and that demonstrates that you're actually linked into the group then. So kinesthetic is engage your audience first using emotion, just by being warm and being caring and being in the moment. That enables you to give an overview, and the visual is very much about overview. So once you've given them the overview, you can link that into what's going to happen next. Here's the story, and they take it on board. Very often I'll hear about feedback from customers where they've said, you know what, I didn't get it. They were talking, but I didn't hear it. And it's because they might have just gone into the detail without making the hook first that brought everybody into alignment to be able to move forward. So that's what the slide's about. There's some other slides that we're not going to cover today, but they're for you to just think about when you review the pack that you're going to be able to download. What happens when communications go wrong, for example? Where do things start to go when it comes to things like being assertive? What can happen, what can go wrong, and what can we do in relation to that? The reason for the cat, by the way, I have to just draw your attention to that, is that if you can sort of see that on the screen, if I zoom in, there he is. So that was a cat we got. It was a stray cat, wasn't getting fed. He was from a farm. Mum was struggling with him, so we brought him in. We fed him. That was the first thing to make him feel like he could start to trust us, or like us at least, but not trust us. But he was hissing and hiding quite a lot. It was only when he started to feel that he could trust us that he really felt he could relax and lie like he does in the middle of the floor with his arms up completely with no defenses. And so as you can see from that thing there on the side, trust is so key when it comes to building your career, because you want people to trust you. So as I said before, I'm seen as a renegade by some, but absolutely by all as a safe pair of hands. Oh no, you can trust Tom to do it. Yeah. I know he comes across as a bit of a renegade, but actually he's a safe pair of hands. And so the trust is something we're looking to deliver within our communication style, so that people really take us as being the next thing that we can utilize and delegate to. And that's what you're always trying to do with your leaders, is get them to delegate to you. If they want to delegate to you, it's because they trust you. So see trust as being something you can really build and leverage. And those slides, those 3 slides there about communications and what can go wrong, is just something to reflect on around the way we do these sorts of things. There's another slide on conflict, how that can happen and the levels that we go through. So sometimes you might find a person who is blue at stage 1 of conflict. And that's this little section here that I'm talking about. And so when we talk to a person around being blue, stage 1, they might feel conflict if people are mistreated. So that's the thing that's their trigger, but they might actually respond using a blue method. The first thing in conflict is to make everybody happy. Where you might be working with a person in your team whose first response to conflict is red. And so that red is going to go, right, well, in conflict, I need to take control. So they may be somebody who say, right, this is what we need to do. And you're like, whoa, I just want to make sure everybody's happy. And they're like, no, this is what we're going to do. Oh, they're so overpowering. Why are they like that? It's not because they're more assertive. It's because their response is more red at the beginning. What you might find is at stage 3, they become blue, at which point you might have become stage 3, which for you might be red. So just think about the kinds of styles that we have when we're going through things that might be conflict based. And I appreciate in an organization, we want to drive out conflict. Things like that can sometimes happen. So that's what that's about. There's a little slide that talks about how we resolve problems, and that's see it escalate, move to resolution where we can engage the person. As you see, the key to overcoming that is about engagement. And this is the slide I want to finish with today. Really useful one, because it enables us to overcome challenges. Conflict can be seen as a challenge. A complaint can be seen as a challenge. So this is a great one for these slide packs to finish on, because it says, well, actually, how am I going to overcome an objection? First thing you need to work out when you go into an organization where there's a team involved is, how do I get my voice heard? If there's an objection, how do I deal with that with calm comfort? So stage one is listen. First thing you do is listen. It starts there, and it's very much about how we're taking in all the little bits of information of what is said and what is not said, so that we can manage that effectively. We're then going to acknowledge. Very important that we acknowledge, because just because you've heard doesn't mean the person that's talking feels that you've listened. So you need to give them a verbal acknowledgement, as we'd call it. And this is great in a pandemic where you're doing lots of telephone calls or lots of video calls. By using your voice to reaffirm that you've taken it in is key. So something like, I see what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, I see your point, I hear what you're saying. Those are just examples of words that prove and create a verbal contract, if you like, that I've paid attention. You then build on it. Two options here. One is if the person is worried, and you can say, I understand what you're saying. Lots of other customers have said the same thing, and what we found with them is this, 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 and this. So you use other customers to let that person know you've got experience and that you've dealt with it before and got a resolution, which builds trust. Now, if they're complaining because they think you've made a big error or you're not good, you can say, look, I understand what you're saying. If I'd gone through what you're describing to me, I probably would feel the same way too. So that's using yourself to align to that individual, and then you talk about, but this is what was intended by that, and this is what we need to do next to move forward. So that's a useful slide for that, because it takes you through to get trust, and then at the trust point, you can start to let that person really feel that you've got it, so that you can offer them a new example of what's going to happen next, working with them, and then testing to see that they've got it. Is there anything else I can help you with on that? Which enables you to get into that zone and then close. Once you've built the trust, you can essentially listen and solve multiple queries. So if you have to handle multiple queries in your role, great opportunity to use a tool like this. So that's the slide pack for today. I hope you've enjoyed that little session. Takes us through to 11:17 into the next part of what we're doing. So if I can hand the screen back over, and we'll have the panel. The panel are going to come up, so you don't have to just listen to me chatting away here. You can actually have the panelists that are going to come up as well. So I'm just going to go through, and I'm going to start to introduce people throughout. David, good stuff. You're here with us. Aoife, jolly good. So I'll go through the individuals. So what's going to happen within this panel today is, rather than just me talking, we're going to have some great experienced people who've developed their careers in housing and in other areas that can really share some of that great knowledge and give us insights into how we can build our careers. So first up, we've got David Silk there. He started off today's session, so you already know him, and he's Director of Operations for the Housing Agency. David previously worked in the Secretariat of the National Forum as a policy analyst and as researcher in the Combat Poverty Agency. And as a senior researcher in the Analytical Services Division of the Department of Social Security. Some of these can be some tongue twisters that I might go through here, so do forgive me if I lose my tongue as we go through this. Susanna is a newly appointed Chief Executive Designate of the approved Housing Bodies Regulatory Authority. She was previously Head of Regulation at the Housing Agency. Prior to joining the Housing Agency, Susanna specialised in risk, financial management, strategy, liquidity management, and stress testing with a number of US multinationals in Europe and Canada. So a real wealth of information there that we can draw from. John McCartney, who's Director of Policy and Communications at the Housing Agency. John joined the Housing Agency having previously been Director of Research at Savills, a statistician at the CSO and Head of Research at Lisney there, yeah? I nearly said Head of Research at Lindsay. My wife's called Lindsay, and I could do with some help. I've been with her 20 years, but I could do with some help on the research just into that alone. So the Lindsay there, you can give us a little bit of insight into that as we go. Aoife Lawler, a civil engineer who's worked in both private consultants and in local authorities for over 25 years. Housing-related experience includes the design of social housing schemes and halting sites in the National Building Agency. working for Goal Afghanistan, supporting internally displaced people to return to their homes, so doing a huge amount of fantastic stuff there to give people that feeling that you get from having a location and a place that you can call home that we all hold to be so important to us. And more recently, as SEO in housing in Louth County Council, delivering on the challenges faced by the Rebuilding Ireland programme. Fantastic stuff there. So I've got some general questions I'm going to start off with, if you guys don't mind. And I'll throw in a wave now I've got through your titles. So good to see you all. So I hope everybody else can see everybody on screen as well from this panel. And as I go through, first thing I want to look at is the thing I referenced earlier on, which is about the fast-paced environment that we work within in housing, with frequent new policy decisions and schemes that are coming up. What I'd like to know from the group, anyone can answer this, is how do you deal with having to work on new policy and schemes that can change so frequently? Over to you.
You stunned us into silence there, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, David? You've gone green, so you jump in if you want.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was gone green. Sorry. Well, the housing agency is 10 years old now, and during that whole period, we've been constantly dealing with new policies, new programs, and it's an ongoing thing. And I think it makes it very fresh, and it's challenging, all right. But the way to do it, I guess, is to learn from the experiences from the past, but always be open to new ideas and innovation, and to be able to develop new ways of thinking and to overcome new problems and new challenges as you're going along, and just really keep informed about what the policy is trying to achieve. So keep your eye on the objective of what it is that we're trying to achieve. I think that those would be the key ones for me.
Yeah. Now, you used a great word there, which was fresh. And one of the things I love about new people coming in, and I always use new. Sometimes people talk about people developing careers in housing, and they use young. And I don't use young, I use new, because people can be any age starting in housing, which is so fabulous. And it really does take people in, because it works in the communities that it works within. So it needs people from all sectors. The fresh ideas that they have. So how can these newly qualified individuals and professionals inject their fresh ideas, as they often lead to real impact for their organisation and for the citizens? So how can people get those in there? You know, go for it. Whoever would like to answer that. John, I think you went green earlier on. Any ideas?
Well, I was really thinking about your original question, Tom, about the the rapid change that we encounter in our working lives, and all of these new policies that come on stream all the time. And one of the things that we should think about is trying to slow the pace, because by their nature, many of the problems that we encounter in the housing market take time to resolve. And people who are suffering as a consequence of these problems, let's say affordability, for example, very difficult to explain to them that these problems take time to change. But taken as an aggregate, sometimes the quick fix policy is not what is needed. Sometimes policy needs to take a longer term view, and that is difficult to achieve, particularly when you've got a relatively short political cycle. So one of the things that we can do as housing professionals is we can try and bring to bear professional, technical, analytical skills to try and create space to do better policy, even if it takes time to do it. And that requires all of the skills and the interpersonal type of skills and the soft skills that you referred to in your presentation, Tom, because you've got to be persuasive, and you've got to try and bring people along on a journey with you through logic. And that can be difficult when they're under pressure, but that's, I think, something that we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the taking time just to think about what it is we want to do next, as you referenced there, makes a huge difference to people bringing in all of that excellence that they've got. Because all of those ideas that are bubbling away, if we just go with our first instinct, that can be something that we go a little bit too in the heat of the moment. We don't really consider how we're going to pace that in with the customer, for example, who hasn't been on board the journey of change that we have, so may not necessarily be in step with us. So with that in mind, where do you think the housing profession is going, and what's the best way that these new housing professionals can contribute to that in the future? So I'll throw that out to you guys.
I suppose from from a local authority point of view, I would see local authorities being really well placed, because over the last 20 years, we've undergone a lot of change. And in fact, change and flexibility is what local authorities are all about. So in dealing with the housing crisis and dealing with the change that has come upon us and going forward, we're well placed to adapt to new policies very quickly, and we can turn around our staffing and our resources. We can pull on many different experts to influence our policy and our change, both in the past and going forward. So in a lot of ways, I would see the key to all of us delivering on this is flexibility, being able to change and switch directions very, very quickly. And to me, that seems important for staff at every level, plus organisations as a whole going forward.
Yeah. So one of the new questions that's just come in as well in relation to that is you mentioned expert there. What are some of the techniques that people can have in mind in relation to keeping up with the latest developments and ideas in the field? What can they do for that?
For me, you have to understand the sector that you're working in. The housing sector is multi-layered. There are multiple careers within this sector itself. You can be, focusing on capital investment, revenue, legal, homelessness, frontline, care and support. There are so many aspects to the housing and housing delivery. At really the core is to understand what it is the key objective at the end of every week, every month. It has to be about the delivery of homes. Within that, then, there are people on this call that are involved in this from all different aspects, from legal, from regulation, from finance. You could be in the RTB, you can be in a local authority, you could be involved with mortgage to rent, you could be somebody going out and buying. Understand what it is that your role is and deliver upon that. Where people are focusing on too many different things and trying to be, I don't know, what is it, the master of none. That doesn't help. That doesn't help us with the delivery. So when you talk about fast-paced environment and policy, I think it's incredibly important that housing professionals understand what it is they are tasked to deliver on a day-to-day basis and get that done, regardless of whether you're a receptionist or you're the chief executive. Understand your role and deliver every day, because it matters for somebody getting into their home.
Superb, excellent. Now questions just coming live as well, because one of the things I just need to stress is that you can have the opportunity to put in new questions. I know that David mentioned this at the beginning, but in the Q&A bit, if you want to put any new ones in for particular individuals, pop your question in there. If you want to direct it in any direction, just put the name check the individual you want it to go to, and I can see that there. One of the new questions that's just come in here is, what do you think will be areas of innovation and growth in housing? So that's a good question for the whole group of you.
Yeah, I think there's innovation in how we're building and how we're designing. If you think now of, say, the social housing that we're building, I mean, the quality and the design of it is exceptional. It's really good, and there's lots of things there. There's also lots of innovation in how we work. I mean, last January, we were all in the office, having our meetings in the office, all office-based, and within a very short period of time, we've had to rethink how we work. And in some ways, it's been good. It's been liberating. I mean, we've gone off and thought about it, and this conference, for example, we've attracted an awful lot more people to it than we would have if we were stuck in the basement hotel, the conference room in the basement. Now, there's good things about that. You have their coffee break and you get to meet Aoife in person rather than having to wave at her, virtually. But the good point is that, more people can join in the conversation and ask questions and participate and so on. So there has been a lot of innovation in how we work as an organization and as a public sector body, and how we communicate and work with local authorities and approved housing bodies, which has been kind of positive, I think. But I'm
Absolutely, and innovation in relation to how we coped in the pandemic is very, very fantastic. I often come across, chief execs speaking to their people where they talk about, do you remember that time when we had a massive flood? Or you remember that time when we had to deal with the sewage that erupted? And they talk about these calamitous events with warmth because of the way their people interacted together closely and brought all that excellence together. And so with things like the pandemic and as it is occurring, hugely challenging to so many people in so many different areas, it has and it can lead to people sort of moving around. Sometimes it makes them feel less inclined to move because they may feel it's an uncertain environment they might be moving into, and with all of the news that we see can lead to that anxiety. What is the best way though for organisations to retain their talent when movement might be in their mind? And that's actually to you. That was directed at you, David. So I'll pop that back to you since you were talking last.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, here in the housing agency, we've recruited about 30 people since lockdown, and we've been onboarding them virtually and getting them into virtual teams. And John is one of our new recruits, you know. So, and it's been great in some ways. I mean, it has been challenging, definitely. But it has been good that people have been able to join, be able to find out about the organization, because part of the, I suppose, first couple of months of any new job is about finding out how the organization works, what's the culture, what's the attitudes, how does it really work, you know, in real life. So that has been challenging virtually, but it has been, I hope, I think through lots of communication and lots of clarity about what we do and how we do it, and one-to-ones and joining groups. And we work here in the housing agency sometimes in teams across different sections working on particular things. So, you know, it's nice to be able to meet different people as well and develop your networks within the organization and then out to other organizations as well. So I think that has been helpful. And then I think that communications thing has been really important, just to kind of reach out to people, make sure that they're okay. It is very challenging working from home, working, you know, from your kitchen or from your bedroom or from if you're lucky enough to have a dedicated study. But it's still, you know, it can be quite lonely all day, just sort of typing away or doing things. So, you know, it's been really important to kind of reach out to people and make sure that they're, you know, feel part of the organization and that they are participating in, as Susanna was saying, the achievement of common goals, you know. So that, I think that's really important, if people feel that they are contributing to common goals. I think that really helps.
That's an important point in relation to the fact that we are working often in strange environments to us. You'll notice from these fine walls, this is a box that I've built in my garden so that I can get away from it all and have a secure environment. And my kids came in and played in here a little while ago, and they left behind one of these figures, and I found myself putting it on the side here just next to me, because I quite like the fact he's there, because he's like, don't forget, there's people who love you. You know, they're there for you. You can talk to people if you need to, and if not, just talk to Batman. He's always there. So, you know, the ability to be able to engage and connect with that. Aoife, from some of the things that you've worked in relation to, say, Goal Afghanistan and working in relation to halting sites, often community becomes a hugely important thing when people are in times of pressure and challenge. So, you know, how have you found how housing has worked and enabled to create that feeling of community? Aoife.
There's lots of different ways, because you've got our tenants and our clients would be our community, but also our staff, our colleagues. So we found in the first lockdown, we were, as a local authority, we were tasked with 16 actions, and only 2 of them were housing. But in fact, we found we needed everything. So what became very clear was that our tenant liaison officers had a key role to play in lockdown. And even though they were meant to step down, not meant to work, they became busier than ever. So they were supporting our tenants on halting sites who no longer had access to their normal facilities by talking to our colleagues in the community side, opening leisure centres for specific hours, providing different materials, different support. And they became a key liaison between us and our clients, and to ensure their safety and their protection. We also, during the middle of the lockdown, we unfortunately had a significant amount of antisocial behaviour, and we had to move people, we had to provide isolation units and things like that. And that was key, them having their number, being able to contact us, knowing that we were there to support them. But similarly, many of our staff became very isolated. And in some ways, the best thing was when after the lockdown, people have to work in the office. So many of our staff are in 2 days a week. And by spreading it over the 5 days, they're in small groups and they're safe. But just being in the office, being able to pass somebody in the corridor seems to have been a huge benefit to many people who live on their own, working in their bedrooms. And it has provided a community and a sense of well-being for many of our staff. So we've found a lot of work is needed in that side. Also, many of our staff have contributed to the community call. So people in the public were ringing in. Sometimes they would rely on the housing staff to meet the needs. And that's a huge benefit to people's well-being and the community's well-being as well.
Yeah, the mention you made there of different areas, like for example, leisure centres, where you might be dipping into getting support from councils and different areas like that. How have you found that the work of the housing intersects with the work of other departments? So like partnership agencies, for example, how have you found that working?
I suppose it gives us a huge resource that we can pull on. So when we're doing energy works, we have specialist energy office that deals with the whole county, but we can partner with them on projects. So where they need houses to be able to deliver a big commercial project, to apply for a grant for energy works, we can provide those houses. And similarly, when we're looking to do big energy works, they can provide expertise and links to the private industry. Similarly, our planners, our engineers, our drainage, our wastewater, it's a huge resource for us to pull in. And the LEO office or the community office, if we feel tenants need training or support to enable them to grow stronger or to apply for grants. So it's a massive resource we have there that we can pull on and bring in and partner with to deliver services.
And that brings Batman back into it. There's in a pandemic, there's been quite a lot of superheroes, and you hear a lot about the superheroes in the NHS, for example, where people really sort of know, right, yeah, they're doing that and they're doing that, and we can see what they're doing here. But there's been so much community-based heroism where people have really been able to step up and make a massive difference. That it's probably had a profound impact on the positive impact of community, which hopefully we can retain going forward beyond the pandemic. Where when we pull together, we achieve a lot. And so, that's great that you referenced that in there as well. So with the introduction of statutory regulation and the new approved housing body's regulatory authority, now, Susanna, you might know this is coming to you with that intro. How important is it for young housing professionals to keep up to date with these developments, do you think?
It doesn't matter whether you're young or old. If you're in a particular sector, my advice would be definitely to keep yourself well informed as to what's happening in your sector. Housing has a huge amount of noise around it, so it can be quite difficult, particularly for new housing professionals, to understand what is the noise and what's reality. So I think it's very important for those that are new to this sector or don't consider themselves an expert. I've been in the AHP sector now for 4 years. I still don't consider myself an expert. And so the areas that I am an expert in, I'm very comfortable. So the real thing is to know, where do you sit? Where does your organization sit in relation to the housing sector? What is it that's changing in that environment? What do you understand about what your specific role is? And what really interests you? Like, what is it about housing that interests you? What turns your crank? And if you're checking for your pulse when you go in or to the office in the morning or turn on your computer in your bedroom, then you're not in the right place. You mightn't actually be in the right area of housing. So for me, you should really be interested and understand what's happening in your sector. I would advise, because there's so much noise, that you get it from solid ground. We talk a lot about fake news, but actually this is, getting it from the housing agency website, the ICSH, whomever it is, understand your sector and understand what is solid information. You're not going to understand and know every single part of it, okay? So you're not, but make sure you have some idea, because if you end up having a chat with somebody in the pub or in a restaurant, you represent housing. And the person that you may be talking to might have a brother or a sister or an aunt or an uncle that may actually just have had their housing problem solved. So they'll want to meet somebody that cares. So just remember, housing touches upon so many different people. So it's not that as the person that, of course, I'm going to want to speak and shout from the rooftop about the new statutory regulator, but really for young housing professionals and for old housing professionals, I'd like really to say, know your sector, be very passionate about it and understand the impact that you can have. Don't get confused with the noise and pick up the phone. This has been the best thing about the pandemic. Nobody's too far away from us. It's easy to get a hold of a minister. It's easy to ask David Silk, you're an expert in that, or I just got so confused. What's the difference between affordable housing and cost rental? Ask the question. No, make sure you're learning something every day.
Yeah, the only silly question is the question that remains unasked. It's always worth asking. And I walked into my own trap there by using the term young. I'm 42, I think, and see myself as young. My dad is 82 and sees himself just as young. And my little boy, one of my little boys, is 9 and thinks he can use a pickaxe. So, age is nothing but a number. And it is very important that I like that term. I'm going to steal that, which is whatever turns you crank. If you keep things fun, what we learn with laughter, we never forget. That's a great way of doing it. So whenever we're looking for development, use that passion that Susanna referenced there, and it keeps it all fun and vibrant. And people love answering people's questions when they can sense the passion they have for the subject. So keep that passion front and center. So great stuff, great response there, great answer. John McCartney, this one's coming straight in for you. So research is a key area, and those in the room in this session today may be interested in moving in that direction. So how valuable is that? I know we've touched on the value of research, but how valuable is it, and where do you see it being utilized the most in relation to research in housing?
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm biased, Tom, but I think it's critically important. We all care, and that's why we work in the jobs that we have. We want to make a difference. We want to help. We acknowledge and understand that housing next to food is probably the highest priority of humanity. So it's critically important, but it's also easy to, through the best of intentions, to go in the wrong direction for the need to do something and the need to do something quickly. And we can at times, be busy fools working away and actually maybe not making as much of an impact as we could and should. And that's where research and analysis and all of that comes in. And Ireland has had its housing problems, and they didn't start today or yesterday. We've had various cycles of housing dysfunction over many years, and when you consider that history, one of the things that we have lacked in the past is analysis and research. And part of the reason for that actually was that we didn't really have good data on housing. And compared with where we were 15 years ago, there just has been a sea change in the quality and availability of data. And that at least provides the infrastructure for a new way of doing things based on evidence and analysis.
And just in the little introduction I gave you, I talked about Lisney and Savills. Are they both private sector organisations, or?
Yeah, indeed. Savills is a PLC quoted on the London Stock Exchange, and Lisney is a privately owned domestic brand, but a private commercial company.
So a good question for you then that's coming here then is, what do you think the benefits of private sector experience can bring and can bring in particular to the public sector?
Oh, that is a really good question. On housing, I think you know, we really are going to have to, I think, expect that there's going to be more private sector involvement in the delivery of social and affordable housing over the next 10 years. Part of that is low interest rates, which are driving capital into any sector that will deliver a return. And in countries like Ireland, where we still have fairly robust population growth, that will mean that private capital is targeting social and affordable housing opportunities for profit in Ireland. The other thing, of course, is that if you look at commercial property, you know, retail has been on, you know, a sort of a difficult path now for 10 or 15 years. And offices now face this challenge of, you know, are companies going to want as much office space as they did in the past now that the working from home model has been proved to be successful? So I think it is going to drive capital out of those traditional commercial sectors. And really, I think, you know, from a commercial real estate point of view, actually residential property is probably going to be the biggest growth sector of the next 10 years. So there's no doubt that there's going to be an appetite for private capital to get involved in this. And of course, we need capital to do all the things that we have to do, including the delivery that Susanna referred to. So there is a marriage to be made here, but everybody is going to have to get the right outcome for their agenda. And that's going to be the challenge as we move forward. It's going to be exciting, but you know, this idea that you know, that you can keep the private sector out or whatever. We had a session on Wednesday, and we discussed the delivery of social housing. You know, whether it should be local authority built or not. And actually, you know, even when the local authorities build directly, they're using private sector contractors. So the private sector is in housing, and it's here to stay, in my view, and I think that involvement is going to grow. And what we need to do is we need to codify that involvement and manage it and come to an arrangement where the private sector capital gets what it needs out of the arrangement, but equally all of the other stakeholders get what they need out of the arrangement too.
Yeah. And from the experiences I've had of housing sector organisations that may have either copied out of the council, or they may have gone out as an agency entirely on their own or arm's length, so many different variables. But there's much more of a focus now in many of them to create subsections of their organisation where they're able to offer almost the private sector new build kind of phase, where they may be opening up the open market to the marketing of these sorts of things, for example. How do you see that challenge of maintaining a footprint in both private sector kind of direction around profitability and public sector footprint in relation to delivering excellent service and profitability? I appreciate private sector does deliver excellent service as well, but often they can do it with a very sort of black and white approach to a balance sheet, whereas within housing, public sector, much more about the community and the positive added value stuff potentially when they have those boardroom meetings. How do you see that balance working for housing agencies and housing organisations? For everybody, this is just general.
Well, for me, certainly from a regulatory perspective, with the significant focus on finance, you know, the interesting thing about the AHB sector is that we have the capacity and capability to leverage off balance sheets. So it really is about understanding the financials of balance sheets, and that it's not a dirty word because you're a charity or that you're in the public environment. Utilising your finance, your funding, your cash flow, and understanding that to its most effective and efficient use of the cost of funds is what they call it in the private sector, but that absolutely matters whether you're 99.9% of approved housing bodies are charities. So the most effective use of balance sheets, of capital, and of revenue funds is imperative. So if that is with the use of private funds and also taking some of the learnings from the private sector in relation to the most effective use of your finance, then that for me is a really, really good thing. What we have to watch for, though, is stretching balance sheets too far. So, you know, if you go back to some of the things we spoke about careers, the professionalisation of the housing sector and delivery of people in homes, that's an area that we need more people to get involved in, is understanding the finance side and bringing in housing finance experts and treasury experts as well.
Good stuff. So with the work that I do, where I'll often work with an individual who's maybe at the beginning of their career or their journey, and for a lot of today's individual delegates that are here, it'll be really beneficial for this one as well. The way that they go back into their organisation to ask for training is often that they do have in mind the balance sheet argument, which is like, I appreciate that there's an investment to be made to get this learning, but this is what I think the return on investment will be for me doing that. And with that point in mind, one of the great questions that's come forward here is, where do you think there are some skill shortages within the sector, skills gaps, if you like, that we could focus on to bring ourselves into that gap, into that area? What do you think? That's again a general question for everybody.
It's a very broad question, I suppose, to try and answer, and I'm glad I'm not being asked it at an interview for a job.
Yeah.
But I think it varies greatly. I mean, you come into housing and you tend to work in one particular area and you develop an expertise in that area, and then you move on to other areas and you develop other expertise. So, for example, in Susanna's area around regulation, probably gaps around governance, gaps around financial models, gaps around asset management, for example. In our own area here in the housing agency, we actually invest quite a lot of money in our staff training budget, and generally staff, when they come, if they haven't come from a housing background, we encourage them to consider the IPA course or the Irish Council for Social Housing course to get that grounding in legislation, policy development, the history of where policy has come from, the impact that housing can have on people and so on, so that they get that sort of early on in their career, and then that encourages them to build necessary blocks as they're coming along in their career, be it in finance or be it in legislation or be it in research skills. So I guess each person needs to think a little bit about their own requirements, and you're learning all the time. I've been in housing now for more than 15 years, and I still feel like Susanna, a bit of a newbie in housing, because there's always something new coming along that you have to kind of get your head around, and a new way of thinking or new policies or new developments or new technologies, new applications of things, new legislation. Like the whole governance of approved housing bodies is really only 4 or 5 years old, and before that there was very little of that. So all of that area has developed in the last couple of years, and so I would sort of say there isn't one gap that has to be filled. There's lots and lots of gaps all across the sector, and it's all about lifetime learning, I think, and making sure that you keep your skills up and that you're always learning. Never sit on your cushion and say, I've learned everything I need to know now about housing. That you never will,
Yeah, good. I'm glad you said cushion then. So when it comes to all of us then, go on, sorry, Aoife, yeah, go for it.
I was just going to point out, there's an interesting thing about housing is that it combines a social heart with a business brain. So if you're coming from a social background where your emphasis is on the tenants and well-being, then maybe you could do with looking at your business skills, financial governance. But vice versa, if you come in purely from a business background, you need to get an appreciation for the people that are at the end of what we do. Everything we're doing is giving somebody a key, and there's that aspect. So depending on what your background is, there are areas that you can concentrate on that would help you do your element of the work better.
Yeah, so a very good point. And I mentioned earlier on about giving verbal acknowledgement. When you're on video conferencing, you get the benefit of seeing people's heads, and everyone was doing that as they went through that. So that was very well liked, that answer, in respect of that. Now, this is maybe a cruel question, given that David didn't want this one in the last one in an interview question. This would be, what would you say was the single most important lesson you've learned in your career and your journey thus far? Anyone can answer that.
General cop on.
Sorry,
you can have as many. General cop on.
That's another one I'm going to take away. Yeah, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it's you can have as many degrees as you like. Housing and social housing is about getting people into homes, and we have a tendency to overcomplicate it and make this out that this is rocket science. It isn't, and we put layer upon layer on it. For me, I think Aoife nailed it there. You know, if you come in, I came in from private sector, just all we ever spoke about was money and margins and the bottom line, and having to transfer and really, you know, understand, you know, to really dig deep into your emotional intelligence and bringing that across into housing was massive. I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah, but it's spot on, and it does link to the top on. Yeah.
It's just pure, it's pure common sense. So forget about all the noise, forget about what you think you know, go back to the basics and think, and always say, what is the end result and what is the outcome we're looking for, which is people in houses, and then break it back down. So for me, the thing to deliver every day is bring your, I'm a farmer's daughter from Meath. I just keep going back to being made work on the farm when I was 15, and that's what's helping me for the last 4 or 5 years. That's the truth, and it's not any of the other skills that I've learned.
Absolutely, couldn't second that even more. You know, it's all about life skills. Bring them to the party. Never feel that something that you've done isn't valid, because it is totally valid. And the people that you work with are so diverse that having experience in a little bit of the things that you do every day just adds a huge amount of value to what it is that you offer. And that goes back to the original slide that we started on with the outcome. So that's a nice loop up, if you like. So David, at the Housing Agency, if I can hand back to you just to loop up today's session, that would be great. And thank you very much for your answers. They were superb.
Thanks very much, Tom, and to all our participants this morning and over the week. It's been a really useful conference, I think. I want to finish off by thanking Jim O'Halloran, who's been helping us in the background with our communications, and also Camille Loftus, who's our new head of policy and practice, and her team, Michael McHale, Sarah Kennedy, Alex Dowdall, and Tara Doyle, have been working really hard in getting the conference up and running. And thanks, a very big thank you to all of you who've joined us. We hope that you found the inputs informative and useful. And please give us your feedback and let us know how we might improve next time. Final reminder that the resource pack is available for download in the sidebar, and also details about the monthly Housing Practitioner Peer Network, which I hope you'll be able to join and find useful. Happy Friday, everybody. Have a good weekend and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're now going to finish the webinar. Have a great weekend.